Yeah.
Hello, testing. You guys hear me? Peter in the way in the back, yeah? How about now, Peter? Everyone good? Yeah? All right. Let's get the show on the road then. Welcome to our April meeting. Has everyone signed in yet? Because we have a ton of stuff to give away, so you're gonna want to be sure to sign in. If you haven't, let me put this out there. Raise your hand. Here's a pen. All right, and next thing, be sure to check out the silent auction behind me. We got a lot of good gear and art and
Shoes.
cooking classes and waiters, everything. So be sure that it flies. Check that out. You can, we're gonna end the silent auction like, I don't know, 10-15 minutes after our speakers tonight. You can pay in cash, check, or do an online donation. So, let's see here. Rainbow Berry has the sign in for Chick and Bick volunteers. Raising her hand back there. So you saw that email this morning about you know, the time slots for that, and you can do it. Be sure to sign in with Rainbow. Kids would really appreciate it. So yeah, this is my last meeting as president. Gotta say the past 3 years sure went by fast. So this will be the last time you have to hear me bumbling, stumbling, and mumbling my way through the announcements, and the last time you have to watch me wrestle with Zoom. Although, you know, the last couple of years, I finally got smart after 3 years and had Scott and Badger help me. So finally figured that out anyway. I figured out that I need help, I guess. What else? So, you know, but you know, I was kind of cleaning up some of my presidential papers, you know, so when I don't donate them to my library at UWRF. But anyway, I was looking at, I had all these old sign up sheets during COVID. And it was, you know, there's only like 12, 15 people in person, and there was like 25 people. I had a note on there online. So, I mean, it definitely helped for that. And I still get comments from people from Amory saying how they, you know, appreciate having the Zoom option. So, anyway. I hope to leave the chapter a little better than I found it. I'm not sure if I accomplished that, but at least I didn't burn it all down. And look at the turnout tonight. So, kind of done too poorly, I guess. But yeah, I'm truly honored to have served as the president of this incredible chapter, and I'm proud of the things that we've accomplished. We've established a really close working relationship with KCC and TCTU. Really paid dividends to aid in the dam removal efforts, and these partnerships will continue to be fruitful beyond the dam efforts. We've continued our restoration work. The fishing opportunities in the area just keep getting better and better. And we have big plans in place to get the South Fork fishable again. So I'm really excited about that. Our education efforts continue. You know, we got the trout camp, we got the Pheasants Forever Youth Day, the RF Clinic, Chick, Bick, and now Stream Girls in the past year. Outreach, we continue to do Earth Day, R4F, other UWRF events, the Expo, Casting for Recovery, Real Recovery, and most recently the Pierce County Groundwater Advisory Board. We've been building community in the chapter. We brought back the banquet. We started some summer outings. Looking forward to the sulfur solstice and full moon fever at Phil's again this year. We continue to refine our fundraising efforts and been very successful. Communications, making some big improvements there. We're finally getting storage on the cloud. So if, I get run over by a bus or house catches on fire and computers lost, we'll still have all the chapter information and history online. So looking forward to that. We got better audio visual on the way. We got a new chapter laptop right here. We've got better messaging on Instagram and Facebook. And we'll soon have better MailChimp, because I suspect MailChimp will become a lot more professional when I move on. There'll be, not every post needs to be tongue in cheek. There won't be obscure references to Monty Python that only maybe 10 of you understand. And as my wife, when I have my wife proofread my MailChimps, she always remarks, does every sentence you write need 3 exclamation points? Is it really that exciting? So, but with all those messages, I only did get one complaint over the years, and that was that baby otters are not cute. They are Satan's spawn, and they will grow up to be super duper chunk killers. So monitoring, we continue that important work, which has greatly aided the dam removal process and guided other restoration efforts. And you're supporting the important work that we're going to hear from tonight. Last year we got chapter of the year, and forgive me because this is the last time I can do this, but last year we even had the conservationist of the year, Garry Horvath. One more time. I just want to see Garry turn red. So all of these achievements, though, are because of you. Your continued support, both with your time and money. Really appreciate all the support you've given me and the chapter, and thank you so much. I do need to thank the incredible board members I've worked with over the past 3 years. Scott Wagner, Suzanne Constantini, Garry Horvath, Rainbow Berry, Randy Arnold, Missy Hansen, Matt Jancourt, Michelle Beavis, Ben Belt, Linda Radamecki, Scott Larson, Badger Flowers, and Scott Stewart. Thank you so much. And I'm not, going anywhere, of course. If I'm reelected, I'll still be on the board. And actually looking forward to what Scott told me when he convinced me to take this position. He said, as ex-president, you'll never have to buy your own drink again. So why is the table of presidents laughing? Anyway, I'm thirsty, so I don't know who's got the first one. Okay. Elections. So we have 6 openings on the board, and the board has put forward the following nominees. Suzanne Constantini, Brock Flowers, Missy Hansen, Linda Radamecki, Matt Jancourt, and myself, Greg Olson. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Going once, and twice. Any other nominations? Do we have a motion to close the nominations?
So moved.
Great. Okay, thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, nominations are closed. So we'll do a person by.
Point of information,
Sure. Yeah.
move to approve the board by acclamation.
Okay. So that means if we can just vote on all 6 candidates right now. All those in favor of the 6 nominees I just mentioned, to be re-elected to the board, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, welcome to the board. Welcome back to the board. And thank you for serving. So now we have the financial report by Suzanne Constantini.
But can I use the clicker?
Yes.
Little long. Can you hear me?
Yep, yeah.
Well, this is my my last finance report to the chapter, and it's the sixth one, so. So this is the financial report from April 1, 2023 to the close is March 31st, 2024.
Yeah.
So what we have first is the unrestricted fund revenues in our current year. And I just want to show you that, you know, our contributions from individuals, corporations, and the private foundations equal 3,904. And then the half-liter memorial appeal that usually starts in June, and I let it go through the whole year rather than closing it out. And we brought in 12,375. However, I do want to say that 3,500 were really donations from individuals in recognition of the volunteer work that Randy has done. And we put it into the appeal fund so we can track it better, but thanking him for his generosity. The banquet and auction, it's really 3x100 we had. Brought in 23,426. But of that, 3,000, around 3,000 was really from the banquet. So I had to count that as revenue coming in. But we did bring in 20,000 from the auction, both from May, the pieces from May, and then our auction online, which is the best that we've done in any time that we've had online auctions. And then our flies and our books and hat sales and interest was $660. And then the federal grant for Stream Girls, we did get a grant for 8,000. We get 75% of that. We did order boots and waders for the Stream Girls from Frog Talks. So we get reimbursed for that, and that grant came in I think it was around March for 2,257. So we still have money left to go into this next fiscal year. So our total income for this this fiscal year was 42,622. Our unrestricted fund expenses, we did spend 3,218 to 501c3s and other TU chapters. And that is, we usually spend about 15 to 18. But there was a young man who wanted to have a paid internship with the DNR. And the president of Star Prairie Fish and Game contacted us and said, would we be willing to pay a third? And the board approved that. So we paid $1,700 for a sponsorship for that internship. He is a senior at UW Stevens Point in conservation and fisheries, which I think is really great. Habitat is 1,173, and of that 500 and some dollars we paid for the monitors that we're using to track trout, and that's really for the DNR. Our communications website and contracts is 4,012. We do have a contract for $850 that we pay for an outside web contract. He really tracks all of our communications and things like that. And we've never had that in the past, and that was recommended that we should have a contract with a webinar. Our banquet and auction and half liter appeal was 5,105. Education brochures, our education and brochures was 327. We did sponsor 2,000 to two women, 1,000 each for Casting for Recovery in this education. And then administration was 3,255. That's all the overhead, the post office and things like that. So our expenses were 31,766. So our total revenue being 42,622 and total expenses 31,766. We made $10,856. The board restricted funds, thank you, Gary, the Sims $10,000 was was a grant that we received. And the donor restricted funds, we did get a $2,500 from this year from Friends of Wisconsin. And the Zephyr grant we received last January, that was 10,000. And the Rogers Family Foundation for 5,000, which is 13,000 being brought in. And it's all designated for the South Fork of the Kinney. And those are by the donors themselves are restricted. Our donor designated funds expenses was just the 10,000 that we gave to the city of River Falls for the dam removal. It was the feasibility. So our total revenues is 60,207. Board designated is 54,487. Donor restricted is 18,588 for $133,282. I made a recommendation to the board last month that we transfer between funds so that we moved from unrestricted at that 60,000 to board designated. So out of that 60,000, we're going to move 40,000, and our current fund balance then would be 20,207. And where we are today is that the unrestricted funds then are 20,207. Board designated goes to 94,487. Donor restricted remains at 18,588, giving us the 133,282. And I will share with you that over the last 3 years, with our fundraising that has occurred between our auctions and the half liter, excuse me, memorials, we've moved 25,000 first year, 25 the second year, and 40,000 this year. And my recommendation was to put it into the board designated so that you have some control over the monies that are being then asked to be used. And one of our, as Greg has said earlier, one of our biggest goals will be to complete over the next 1 or 2 years the restoration and installation of the aero structures on the South Fork of the Kinney. And we do have the buy-in from the DNR. Any questions? Yes.
And that seems like a lot of fun. Could you just share how much it's going to cost to install?
I think we'll save that for the May meeting because I would like to have a chance to talk with Casey and the DNR and actually map out the funds that they have, the funds that they're thinking, and the funds that we have, and also the grants that we're writing for. We have Garry and Missy and I think Brock Flowers are in the process of writing for the Embrace the Stream. And I do know that we've got the potential of $5,000 from Pheasants Forever. So we've got money that's accumulating, and I think when we take a look at our money, the monies that are coming in that we're kind of knowing about, we're going to be over $100,000. And I think we just need an opportunity. It's premature, Scott, to speak to it in exact numbers. I would rather wait to have a maintenance committee meeting along with the DNR and be able to map it out. The objective would be to have a project plan for the timeline, funds, and things like that. So I'd like to defer that. But thank you. Anything else? Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Suzanne. Excellent job as always. And now on to the main event. Our speakers for tonight are our own Kent Johnson and Dr. Clarke Garry. Kent Johnson.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Scott had a point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
We need a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
I suppose, yeah. Yeah, do we have a motion to,
Move to approve.
Second.
all those in favor say aye? Opposed? Okay. Report passes. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Suzanne. for just running that out.
All right. So yeah, now on to the main event. Our speakers for tonight, Kent Johnson, Dr. Clarke Garry. Kent holds a BA degree in biology from St. Olaf College and an MS degree in aquatic biology, aquatic toxicology from Michigan Tech. He worked for 38 years as an environmental scientist and manager developing, implementing, and directing water quality monitoring programs for large rivers, streams, and lakes in the Metropolitan Council of Environmental Services in St. Paul. He's been a Kiap member since 1988 and has been heading up our stream monitoring and stormwater management since 1990. He's also worked with TU-Dare on stream monitoring and was the WISE H2O project coordinator. Dr. Clarke Garry is professor of biology emeritus from the University of Wisconsin River Falls, retired after 30 years of teaching general biology, zoology, and entomology. He's a BA in zoology and an MS in entomology from the University of Missouri, Columbia, and a PhD in entomology from University of Wisconsin-Madison. Clarke came to appreciate the insects and crustaceans of the Kinnickinnic River, beginning with group projects carried out by his students on the South Fork. In 2001 and 2002, he completed a comprehensive macroinvertebrate study surveys of the Kinney, documenting insect and crustacean populations inhabiting the main stem. He contributed regularly entomology column of Midwest Fly Fishing Magazine, and his essays are available in book form in the Kinnickinnic Stories of a River and Its Insect Life. Dr. Garry is actually my biology professor, and I don't know if you got time for a quick story, just one more story. My last story. Okay. So my junior year rolled around and I kind of looked at the credits I had. I'm like, what the heck have I been doing? I mean, I got to pick up the pace here. There's no way I'm going to graduate in 4 years. And a couple of my best friends, they kept talking about this biome biology course that they were taking. And you only met a few times before spring break, a few times after spring break to present your project. And then you went to sunny, warm Big Bend National Park over spring break, and you got 4 credits for this. And I was like, wow, I got to get in on that. The only problem was I only had Dr. Garry's Bio 100 class. This was an upper 300 level class, I believe, if not 400. And so I didn't have any of the prerequisites. But I got my courage up and waltzed into Dr. Garry's office and said, Dr. Garry, what you really need on this trip is a chemist. It'd be a totally different perspective for all you biologists. Great insights I'm sure I can provide. And kind of, I went on and on a bunch of other BS. And I stopped and just kind of sat there for a little bit. And he's like, you're in. So I got to go on the trip. I had a really fun project. I learned a lot. I tested the salinity of soil samples in Big Bend National Park. We drove straight through in vans from River Falls all the way to Big Bend National Park. When we would get out at a wayside, Dr. Garry would pull out the hacky sack and school us all in that. I can remember there was one wayside that the walls of the structure were rock, and he was like Spider-Man crawling, doing rock climbing across that. What else? Oh, we had a great time camping and hiking, and remember that there was a mountain lion that kept watch over our camp, and we had a spotting scope on him just to keep track on him. And I do have two beer stories from that trip. One, we paid a guy $1 to cross the Rio Grande into Mexico. And, you know, it's like 120 degrees. It's like walking on the surface of the sun. We walked like 2 miles to this little village, and they had a cantina. And there was no air conditioning. It was outside, but at least it was in the shade. And I can still remember that first sip of Corona. That was the best beer still that I ever had. And then Dr. Garry was cool. He let us buy beer from the campground store, so we could have some refreshment around the campfire at night, even though I was actually a few days short of my 21st birthday. But I can remember we went in there and we bought Lone Star beer. You know, we were, yeah, you know, this is something really exotic, and not this Wisconsin, not the old Milwaukee and Leinenkugels that we have been drinking up here. And you know, we're sitting around the campfire drinking it, like, oh yeah, this is big bold flavor. You know, this is beer from Texas, you can tell. And I was looking over the can, reading it, and in the fire glow, I could see on the very bottom of the can, brewed by G. Heilman Brewing, La Crosse, Wisconsin. Like, we've been drinking old style in a different can this whole time. That was kind of a bummer, but anyway, Dr. Garry is a great professor, and I learned a lot. So I thank you for that. Okay, so the title of their talk is the Kinnickinnic River Macroinvertebrate Monitoring, Past, Present, and Future. What do we know about the aquatic insect trends nationally, regionally, and locally, including the Kinney? What do we need to learn, and what can we do? Now, there's going to be a bunch of you know, graphs and stuff. So if you want to move up, you know, we can intersperse in between the tables. If you want to move up, feel free. They're going to have a survey for anglers afterwards, so stick around for that. And Dr. Garry, Kent, come on up.
Yes.
Sure. Everybody here and see okay?
No, turn it up. No.
More volume.
More volume? I can yell louder. Yes, is that better? We're good? I can hear myself now. Thanks to all of you for coming this evening, and even more importantly, thanks to everyone, chapter members and the board who are supporting this project. It's a very intensive 4-year project to take a comprehensive look at the health of the macroinvertebrate community throughout the Kinney from top to bottom. So we will be talking a little bit about past based on Clarke's remarkable work in 2001 and 2002. We've got a solid basis for comparison to present day. And then we're trying to set the stage with this project for future monitoring so we can revisit health of the Kinney down the road as well. Someone can, not sure it'll be me. We'll be able to do that 20 years hence. Before we kick into the presentation, I'd just like to note a couple things. Our report with results of the first year of monitoring in 2022, comparison to Clarke's results in 2002 is on the Kiap-TU-Wish website. So you see the address there at the bottom of the slide. It's in our cold water science library under Kinnickinnic River. So check that out. It's got all the details, more information than we have time to cover tonight. So check that out when you get a chance. Also, Clarke has available tonight a few copies of his absolutely remarkable book. I'm sure many of you have either seen it or read it in the Kinney. With him tonight for purchase, and he may even provide an author's signature. Is that true? All right. Before we dive into the Kinney monitoring results, we made this presentation last Monday at Twin Cities Trout Unlimited chapter meeting. And several months in advance of that meeting, Bob Luck, who's the chapter president, kind of challenged us to take a look at what's going on with aquatic insect populations. We're getting a lot of reports in the popular media that things are trending downward. Now, where have all the hatches gone? What's happened to the sulfurs, the trichos, the caddis hatches? Some of that information and those questions coming from our own chapter members and those over in Twin Cities as well. So on the front end here, we're going to take a look at perhaps what's going on a broader scale. World wide, North America, Upper Midwest, Wisconsin. And to do that, Clarke did the majority of the homework on this. So he went to scientific literature, all of which is peer reviewed by other scientists. So all of this information is grounded in scientific fact rather than popular media, which can tend to be maybe a little bit hysterical at times and stretching. But so we'll start out here with a few slides on what we discovered as a result of a I wouldn't call it a deep dive, but a pretty intensive dive by Clarke on what we're seeing on a broader scale here.
Thanks, Ken, and thanks, Greg, for that trip down memory lane. And I had forgotten most of that myself. So this is our conversation starter. If you would just take a couple seconds to read through these paper titles and headlines, I guess. It's not the most fun start to a talk, but this is what we're starting with. There's a lot of discussion of apocalyptic events, and we'd like to just try to moderate that a little bit and move on maybe just to some different terminology with what we know is happening. So as Ken mentioned, my first way of approaching this is to dig through all the literature that's out there on the topic. And a lot of this is summarized in a paper following a meeting in 2019 in St. Louis, a meeting of the Entomological Society of America, where they invited all of the population ecologists from around the world that have been considering this topic. And a way that you can get more in touch with this meeting, if you're at all interested, is to click on this series of slides, which I understand will be posted or is posted at your website. If you click on this line right here, it will take you to the meeting, and you can actually listen to the talks that were given by 11 of these authorities. It's there's not a whole lot of intense statistics or anything like that. It's very understandable. I think you would learn a lot. The whole idea here, of course, is to figure out what the population trends actually are, find the gaps and limitations, evaluate the stressors. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute, and start talking about things that can be done to mitigate these declines, the ones that are real. A lot of this is has to do with data and the absence of data, and it seems there's more absence related to this than there is present. Also, down here is a link to the paper that came out, and there's a lot of just good readable information in there on the topic. talking about stressors. And this is where the first time I heard the stressors used in the context of this idea of death by 1,000 cuts. Not an apocalypse, but a slowly developing problem. We're familiar, all of us, I'm sure, with a lot of these stressors. And the paper that, if you happen to take a look at it, it has a nice rundown on a lot of these. It kind of fits things into the larger picture. But the thing that strikes me most about this is not that it's just one or two of these that are likely in operation at a given time, but there are multiple stressors. And the way that insects respond to stressors is to reduce their population numbers by reacting to them, or actually losing species. Two particular resources that I would point you to also, which are, I think, most closely related to what we might be dealing with in the upper Midwest here in the north central US. Habitat destruction and neonicotinoids or neonics, these insecticides. I've got two examples here. One is a paper by Houghton and DeWalt, who modeled over the last 30 years the decline of caddisflies in the upper Midwest, and have linked this statistically and very scientifically to the destruction of habitat. And notice the term watershed level habitat disturbance. If you'd like to see that paper, and again, the abstract, the introduction, the conclusions are all very readable. You can click on this line right here and get to that paper. As far as neonics, you might have seen this. This is a talk by Michael Miller that was given at the 2023 Driftless Symposium. And in that talk, Mike talks about the detection of neonics in Wisconsin streams. 55% of these were at concentrations which can cause behavioral changes and long or short-term toxicity to aquatic invertebrates. This is in waters of Wisconsin. If you'd like to see that, you can click on this or just do a search on it. It's pretty easy to find online. Yeah, I think that's going to be this is also there's another talk by Michael Miller that's going to be on the Wisconsin TU website linkage tomorrow night, and I believe 8 o'clock.
What we tried to do with the literature is grounded in science. I think that's our best ability to detect whether or not these trends are actually occurring. And Trout Unlimited is a science-based organization. We lean heavily on science, and we depend on it for a lot of the management decisions that we make. And I think a lot of what you're seeing here, these stressors, death by 1,000 cuts, all of which represent possible advocacy points for Trout Unlimited. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we're experiencing these declines. We're excellent spokespeople to address a lot of these topics and stressors. So just keep that in mind as we go through these slides. This is one of my all-time favorite topics, hexagenia. When I worked at the Metropolitan Council, our monitoring team conducted a 30-year survey of hexagenia emergences along the upper Mississippi River, basically from St. Paul, Minnesota down to La Crosse, Wisconsin. I'll show you a few slides of those emergences in a minute here. But going back, if I can get the pointer to work. Uh-oh. There we go. So one of the references that Clarke mentions, Stepanian et al. In 2020, they made some major points with regard to hexagenia populations. And for those of you who have not observed a hex hatch on a big river, it's a sight to behold, a real phenomenon. These are the biggest mayflies in North America. There are two species really, Bilineata and limbata, that inhabit these waterways. And what Stepanian points out, that in the middle of the 20th century, 1950s, there were enormous summertime swarms of these hexes across many of North America's largest waterways. And the ones that they were focused on primarily were the eastern Great Lakes, Huron and Erie, and then the upper Mississippi River. And by that, I mean roughly from Twin Cities area down to the Quad Cities, encompassing locks and dams all the way down to 19. What Stepanian noted is that by 1970, most of these mass emergences had largely disappeared. So what I'm hoping to emphasize here is there's an ebb and flow to a lot of these population trends. So by 1970, these massive swarms from the 50s were gone in the Great Lakes and in the upper Mississippi River. And why was that the case? Well, there were many what we call point source discharges of pollution going on to these waterways. And by that, I mean industrial discharges and discharges from municipal wastewater treatment plants, which were not treating very effectively. In 1972, Congress passed the Clean Water Act, and basically what it said is all of our surface waters in the nation need to be fishable and swimmable. And with the passage of that legislation, all of the industrial and municipal dischargers had to meet permit requirements that ensured compliance with water quality standards that were protecting fisheries and public health. So literally in the course of a decade or 15 years, some of these surface waters almost turned on a dime with regard to improved water quality. And so Hexagenia responded. These large emergences in the eastern Great Lakes and upper Mississippi River returned with improved water quality. And that's the thing about hex. It's a good indicator of clean water. And on a tolerance range from 0 to 10, with 0 being intolerant and 10 being really tolerant of pollution, they land at about a 3 or a 4. So they're pretty good indicators of clean water. Now, after the resurgence in the mid 80s into the 90s, so what went down also went back up. Recent upper Mississippi River radar surveillance studies indicate a 50% decline again in hex hatches over the upper Mississippi River in the last decade or so. While we were conducting our long-term surveys at the council, just kind of by coincidence, around 2010 or so, the National Weather Service figured out that it could document these hex hatches on their radar networks. So they were very visible. The extent, the timing was all there to see on the radar system, just like a weather system, a rain event moving across the upper Mississippi River system. It's remarkable. They refined it to the extent that they could estimate numbers in swarms, up to 1 billion mayflies. So these radar surveillance studies over the last 10 years have shown about a 50% decline in the Mississippi and about an 80% decline in the eastern Great Lakes, especially Lake Erie. So what was up went down, went up, and now it looks like it's perhaps on the way down again. So that's the value of these long-term monitoring programs and continuing to measure hexagenia vitality or not. So here's to allow you to experience what these hex hatches are like. On the left is Dr. Calvin Fremling, who is a biology professor at Winona State University, right on the Mississippi River. And he spent 4 decades, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, studying hex emergences on the upper Mississippi River throughout most of its length. So here he is taking some notes during Hexagenia bilineata hatch, probably circa 1960s or 70s. Here's one of his collaborators checking out this pile of hex that looks to be present on either a lock and a dam or a bridge deck. And then this is a more recent photo, 2010, taken of Minnesota DNR staff out monitoring on Lake Pepin in the midst of a mayfly swarm. And so the public, these are bizarre creatures. They don't appear but about a month or 6 weeks every summer. They create slimy, slippery messes on bridge decks, cause crashes and slips and slides and sidewalks, and they're an inconvenience. But what the public should know is this is a cause for celebration when they emerge. And then just a couple more photos here. Picture I took at one of our monitoring sites at Red Wing Lock and Dam 3. Again, this was about 2010. It's kind of hard to see in the shadow here, but this is the aftermath of an emergence the evening before. So this is a pile of Hex bilineata about halfway up the door, and then carpeting the walkway on the locks and dams. And it was fun to be there in the aftermath, because lock personnel would come out with their fire hoses and wash all of these mayflies into the water. And I have literally seen circumstances where there are 40-pound carp and catfish that are upside down on the surface vacuuming these mayflies. Well, imagine, if you will, the biomass here for fish underwater and fish and birds at the water surface and birds as in the aerial environment. And then this other picture was John Sullivan, my collaborator down in La Crosse with Wisconsin DNR. So these were swarms coming out of the Pepsi machines the next morning. It was all free, much as you could eat or drink. So just in wrapping up this piece, Clarke is going to say a little bit about where we can go from here to start addressing what appears to be real declines in these populations, and how we can begin addressing some of these stressors. Oh, that's mine too. Sorry, I'm going to catch this one. In the course of our research, we did find some positive news as well. So Crossley et al., a number of authors here, did a survey across long-term ecological research sites, of which there's 70 across the country. And in a 2020 publication concluded that really they didn't see any net abundance and diversity declines across these 70 sites of either terrestrial or aquatic insects. And then the big analysis conducted by Van Klink and other authors also in 2020. So these are all relatively recent papers. This was done 160 surveys across 40 countries worldwide from a data set of about 1,600 survey locations. And they also found slight declines in terrestrial populations, and only on the other end of that, slight increases in freshwater insect abundances. You know, as we were looking across all these publications, we were kind of looking for a common theme to wrap things up. And Van Klink et al. Said it really nicely. Basically, what it boils down to is local drivers, local stressors of decline matter. And while recent studies have been reporting alarming declines in insect populations, really some questions persist about the breadth and pattern of these declines. And of course, we're limited by the amount of data that are available as well. But they sum it up by saying these patterns of variation suggest that local scale drivers are responsible for many of these changes in population trends, which makes sense, right? The insects are experiencing stressors at the local level and responding to them. But it does provide hope for directed conservation actions. So these populations, while they may be in decline, also have potential to recover. And I think that's where an organization like Trout Unlimited comes into play. All right.
So where do we look for solutions? Well, this first resource that I think is fairly fairly astounding, I guess, is that there are people people at very high levels in the insect ecology population realm that are calling for changes in certain kinds of human activities. This first one is a letter to the Frontiers of Ecology and Evolution, a research journal signed by 58 international scientists. But they were kind of looking at this from the large scale standpoint of what could possibly be done, and they put together what they call a roadmap, a fairly concise series of ideas on what might be done. Obviously, they try to emphasize those things that are effective, that are locally relevant, are economically sound, and pointed directly to farming, habitat management, and urban development as some of the places that mitigation might be applied. I might, by the way, kind of suck this in just to show action occurring. The entire European Union has banned a couple of these neonics from usage in Europe. They're still in Wisconsin streams. The last reference here, which I'll just mention very quickly, is a paper that reviewed many of the different decline possibilities and stressors. And what their main theme was let's do something now. Let's take action now. We don't have to have all the data to take action that might help mitigate stressors. Oh, this is mine. I'm sorry. So again, to try to summarize, we know that insect populations are declining worldwide. We know that there are major declines in certain areas and have been well documented with good data. Probably the background decline is something between 1 and 10% a year. That happens quickly, decade after decade. 1 to 2% may be reality. A lot of these are estimates. Most of the declines, the heaviest declines, are in areas where humans are the most active. There's a lot of variability in populations of insects. It's very difficult to get a handle on some of these. Even some of the most common insects that you run into, nobody knows about the ups and downs, or they know about the ups and downs, but they don't know when they're happening or how extensive they are. We need baselines on the biomass and abundance in long-term studies. None of those seem to exist. Landscape level habitat disturbance, that gets back to the DeWalt Houghton paper that I pointed out earlier. And one of my, talking about the disturbance and the effect on species richness, which is something we'll get to here in a couple of minutes. And one of my favorite recently discovered lines is, in every respect, the valley rules the stream. Pointing right back to this idea of habitat disturbance. In relation to the Forester paper, we can take action now. And be careful when you're reading the popular media.
Going back to Bob Luck's charge to us before the TCTU chapter meeting, he suggested that he was getting some feedback from their chapter members, and I've heard it amongst Kiap-TU-Wish members as well, that the bug hatches and the Kinney aren't what they used to be. And so we devised a short 2-page survey and would like to solicit your input. based on your experiences, angling experiences and observations of hatches in terms of what you think might be going on in the Kinney over the last 20 years or so. A lot of you, if you're like me, you keep journals or ledgers, and if you could complete the survey and return, it's got my return address information here. Hopefully we can post this on the chapter website too. It's a Word document, so if you want to grab it and complete it that way and email it, that would work too. But we'd love to get your feedback, just so we have a better idea what's happening and can use that information to kind of direct our analysis of the data we collect over this 4-year period. So we'll distribute this at the end of the meeting. We got paper copies, and if it's on the website, you can grab it there as well. And I promise I won't share, I don't think, any of the fishing details in the location. There's already been a request that I not do that from a couple of the survey returners, so. Given this audience, I don't think I need to say a lot about why we should be macroinvertebrate monitoring. What it boils down to is these bugs best integrate all of the stressors, the water quality, the habitat conditions, the land use changes that flow over the top of them continuously while they're in the water. So who better to ask about health of the Kinney than its residents, particularly aquatic insects like this survey will do. But we've also seen that with Marty Engels and Casey Yalloway's trout surveys of our local streams, and the outstanding job that they've been doing, giving us feedback on how trout populations are doing in these streams. And I will always remember what Marty Engel told me and maybe us at one point. If you're a trout in any of our local waters and you're 16 inches or under, you are eating aquatic or terrestrial insects for the most part. That is your diet. There might be some exceptions, but that's basically it. So what are trout eating in the Kinney? Well, that's part of what this survey is undertaking. And a healthy macroinvertebrate population probably contributes to that healthy trout population. So why? They're good integrators of multiple environmental stressors. They also have limited mobility. They don't go far, right, in the aquatic form. And they have a longer lifespan, months to years. So they've got some time to integrate changes in water quality and watershed conditions. In Wisconsin, the use of aquatic macroinvertebrates for evaluating stream health was initiated by Dr. William Hilsenhoff at UW-Madison. And in 1977, he developed the Hilsenhoff Biotic Index, or HBI, which is an indicator of water quality. And we'll show you how we apply that metric a little bit here. So this is the survey that we've embarked upon. We're actually halfway through. It covers the Kinney top to bottom, from the mouth down here near the St. Croix River, site 1, all the way up to the headwaters at site 17. And these are the 17 sites that Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources established in the 90s, perhaps 96, and have been using ever since. And Clarke used these 17 sites for his 2001 and 2002 survey work. So we're going back to these sites after 20 years and resurveying to see how conditions then are different from conditions now. Hopefully not much, but we'll find out. And just to set the stage, we got 5 sites in what we like to call the lower Kinney, 2 in the River Falls area. You could maybe add site 8, which is up near Quarry Road, northeast corner of River Falls, and then a series of sites in the upper Kinney here. The contributing tributaries in the upper and lower Kinney, we aren't doing any sampling on those tributaries at this point. And this, one of the typical sites, site 4 down here in the canyon area. This is the team sampling in June of 2023, utilizing a couple different sampling protocols. So The two sampling protocols that we've been using are single habitat and multi-habitat. And the distinction between the two is the single habitat focuses on riffle areas exclusively. And looking for riffle-specific macroinvertebrates. And from this type of monitoring protocol, it's somewhat quantitative, so we can calculate a number of helpful indices that are indicative of stream health. It's widely used statewide, actually, by Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for water quality records, and we've used this protocol before up in the North Kinney Monitoring Project for that 9-year period. The multi-habitat sampling protocol has been devised by Clarke to represent all stream habitats present at a site. He'll say a little bit more about that shortly here. So it's meant to be a habitat-wide inventory of macroinvertebrates, a census, if you would, and a presence-absence situation. And it's been used to document, as I mentioned, macroinvertebrate fauna of the entire Kinney with Clarke's work in 2001 and 2002. The single habitat or HBI sampling protocol, the field work consists of collecting 3 subsamples. You're basically standing upstream of a D-shaped net here, kicking the bottom riffle habitat, and the invertebrates are being transported downstream into the net. So we do that in 3 separate riffle locations and composite those subsamples into a single sample. And then in conjunction with that sample, we're taking some habitat measurements as well: water depth, current velocity, what does the habitat consist of in the bottom, stream width, canopy cover. There are a number of factors that roll into why macroinvertebrates might be present in these riffle areas. All the samples that we collect go to UW-Stevens Point Aquatic Biomonitoring Laboratory. When they get the core sample from the site, they sort out 250 specimens from the entire sample, and then all the specimens in 250 subsample are identified to either genus or species level. Lowest practical taxon, but normally species. These people are really good at identifying bugs in various instar stages. So.
Okay, multi-habitat sampling, basically using the same net that you saw Kent using for the single habitat. We developed this idea of not just looking at riffles at the site, but looking at all the evident subhabitats. And so that is a little bit more fun in a way. And what you end up with is a much wider array taxonomically of the kinds of specimens that you get. Basically, I started doing this with 10 subsamples at a site. The sample the protocol calls for sampling a habitat for 2 minutes, moving the materials from that net to a tray with water in it. John knows what I'm talking about here. Sorting through that tray to pick out the specimens in 10 minutes. So that's a 12-minute subsample, and then the collector moves on to the next habitat. So you do that 10 times at a site, 120 minutes, takes 2 hours to get that sample. And then for this multi-habitat sampling, the lab at Stevens Point grids out 300 random insects and identifies those for our results. When I went back to see what I had actually done in 2002, I summarized the different kinds of habitats that I had sampled from 4 different sites here, actually the ones that Kent had pointed out earlier, 2, 6, 7, and 8. So that's way downstream and in the River Falls area. And these blue pieces of the habitat pie show basically riffle. They're still included in the sample. But then additionally, you move out of the riffles into some of the other kinds of substrates, trying to pick a variety of substrates, into the silts, into the various kinds of debris and silt mixes, into woody debris, and then on into the vegetation. So this is a broader look, and broader results come from it. Using the two protocols together. We have the wider look with the multi-habitat, and it gives us a kind of as Kent mentioned, a census, gives us a broad look, a lot of different things in there that you wouldn't find in riffles. And then the single habitat is widely used in the state of Wisconsin. It can be used to compare rivers to each other. It can be used to compare a site from 1 year to another or 1 decade to another. And it's very versatile. What you get, as Kent mentioned, is the HBI, which is a single number that represents the water quality based on the macroinvertebrates. And we also are getting an index of biotic integrity, which is a more sophisticated calculation from the macros that are collected there. And I don't think we're going to spend any time on that, but you'll hear more about HBI a little bit later. Back to the idyllic collection afternoon in the Lower Kinney. You can see Kent here. These flags are, he has the riffle marked out where the samples are going to be taken, and is doing an extensive amount of habitat measurement at that site. And there's Kent. And here's me kneeling over, sweating over my tray on the sand beach there, picking out all of the specimens I can get in that 2-hour sampling period. So this is what we have done so far. In 2002, we have these 4 traditional DNR sites taken care of. We added in 2 sites that are strategically taken or placed around the idea of dam removal. So we'll have data on that area that we wouldn't get from these sites. And then in 2003, we did a Lower Kinney site and started really intensively looking at the Upper Kinney. So that's where we are right now with 8 of the traditional 17 sites accomplished, and plus a couple of extras. And then what we do with these samples when they're sent in is, now both single habitat and multi-habitat samples were taken each of these sites on a given day or days that are fairly close together. And then with those are also sent in some of my 2002 samples that were taken on a very close date to when those were taken. And those are analyzed right alongside the multi-habitat and single habitat collections. So the samples are paired almost as perfectly as you could get them from 2002 to 2022-23. They're looked at by the same people, they're graded by the same people, they're identified by the same people. So it makes a really, really nice comparison over 20 years. Okay, just a little bit of data here. This is the fun part, as far as I'm concerned. Here we have on the horizontal axis, we have 4 sites. The red line here is the division between the Lower Kinney to your left and the Upper Kinney to your right. The blue is a demarcation of 2002 and the green of 2022. The values here are for a metric called species richness, which is if you only had one number to depict the quality of that site from a macroinvertebrate standpoint, it would be how many species are there. Species richness is that number. So I've even heard people that are disappointed in looking at a single number, but you have to realize that that number represents a community of organisms. All your mayflies and your beetles and your scuds and everything is in that number, and they're interacting with each other. there's diversity there. The more species that are there, the greater the diversity, and presumably the more stable that community is. So we do have, you can see that some differences in 2002 and 2022. We're interested in what's going on there. This is site 2 and site 6. We're going to have 3 and 5 done this year. So we're really interested to see where those are going to fall in as far as species richness. And of course, then we're filling in up here, not between 7 and 8, but up above site 8, we're getting a lot of upper Kenny species richness values. This metric can be used again to compare sites to each other. Can be used to compare dates or decades to each other. And then this is a very similar graph, but it's a subset of the previous numbers. These are the EPT, or the Ephemeroptera, Plecoptera, Trichoptera, the mayflies, the stoneflies, and the caddisflies pulled from that larger collection. These are the intolerant. This is the intolerant crowd out of the whole bunch. And again, it's the same thing with the blue representing the 2002 and the green representing the 2022. These numbers are all fairly close to each other when you're starting to compare one year to another, and we're sort of holding reservation where it looks like there might be a drop here. But this is sampling, and when you're sampling, you can't be 100% sure that if it was there, that you got it. Another part of the problem solving is that people are very much interested in is, if we collected something in 2002, did we collect it again in 2022? So oops, I didn't really do that. I picked out these 3 blue-wing olives, these 3 betas, Brunea color, Flavistriga, and Trichodatus, that I collected in 2022 at those 4 sites, the ones we've been emphasizing. And you can see that I collected it with the green dot. You can see I collected it in almost every case. Again, site 7, which is sort of in the middle of town, I didn't get it. Doesn't mean it wasn't there, but that's a sample. And then to show you the results from 2022, in this we combined the multi-habitat and the single habitat together. These are recollections. Okay, so if there's a green dot and an orange dot there, it means we're picking up with both protocols. And I think this is a pretty good recollection proportion, with just one example out of 12 where I didn't recollect one of the beta. Is it yours?
I think it's a handoff. So transitioning here to, these are single habitat sampling results. So let me set the stage here. Clarke's done that with previous slides, but we added a couple sites with the single habitat monitoring protocol in 2022. So on the x-axis here, the horizontal axis, we have sites, again, 2, 6, 7, and 8, which you saw in Clarke's multi-habitat slides. And then because of the Kinney monitoring plan for dam removal and river restoration, we added a couple more sites, pre-dam removal and restoration. So we added a site 504. We also used a different numbering system just to confuse things a little more. But we added a site 504, which is about 200 meters downstream from Powell Falls Dam. And then a site 515, which is located in the new Kinney Channel in the drawn down Lake Louise. I think most of you are familiar with that new channel after the 2020 drawdown. So with those 6 sites, 122 are identical. Those 2 are identical. Same for these 2 in the upper Kinney. Again, the distinction between lower and upper Kinney. So coming back to that species richness metric, which Clarke just described and is a really important one, we can kind of see across the board here, upper and lower Kinney, a really high number of unique species present in both the upper and lower Kinney. Very comparable numbers from top to bottom. Some sites look, well, they do sample out as more species than others. This 504 kind of sticks out. What we haven't done yet because of low numbers is we haven't run any statistical analyses yet on these numbers, and we can do that on the single habitat samples. And we will, as we add a few more sites, try to determine if some of these what look to be real differences are actually statistically significant differences. The one that does stand out here as lower than all of the rest is this new site in Lake Louise, the new river channel that courses through Lake Louise. So kind of keep your eye on this site 515 as I go through the next few slides. And going back to this measure of EPT richness or EPT species, mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies is a subset of overall species richness. Again, we see pretty comparable results here between the upper Kinney and the lower Kinney. This 504 tends to stand out as having the highest number of EPT species. And again, this 515 seems very different than the rest, having only 6 EPT species. With the power of the single habitat sampling protocol, we mentioned before that we can calculate 2 metrics that are really important that describe water quality and overall river health. The first is this Hilsenhoff Biotic Index, or HBI, which measures water quality at the particular site. And it's based on the degree of organic matter present, organic pollution, which basically means carbon-based sources, which will ultimately decompose in a water body and use oxygen to do it. So if you have a lot of organic pollution, you can decrease oxygen levels. It's probably pretty rare in these cold water situations, but it can happen. So the way this metric works is it's an inverse scale. It's based on pollution tolerance values of the species involved, which start at 0, which means very pollution intolerant. They don't like pollution. And at the other end of the scale, 10, we love pollution. We'll live here where nobody else does. So based on these tolerance values, the species present, and the number of individuals of those species present, we can calculate an HBI, and it's an inverse scale. So 0 to 3.5, excellent, 3.5, 4.5, very good, and on up to very poor in the top 3 categories. So looking across these sites again, we've got one site 7 right in downtown River Falls, which grades out as excellent water quality. We've got a couple here up at site 8 up near the bypass, and the site immediately below Powell Falls Dam, which grade out as very good. And then the other 3, these 2 are in the good category. And then coming back to this 515, fair. So as we kind of start to stack a weight of evidence approach up, this site is tending to stand out a little bit, and I'll get to that in a little bit here. The other index that Clarke mentioned is macroinvertebrate index of biotic integrity. That's a really great metric because it starts to integrate multiple stressors and their impacts on aquatic macroinvertebrates. So in the driftless area, this metric integrates things like acres of row crop coverage in the watershed, livestock presence in the watershed, amount of urbanization and imperviousness in the watershed, what's the stream bank and stream bed conditions, what is habitat heterogeneity. So it rolls all these together because all of them have impacts on invertebrates, and it also rolls in 9 macroinvertebrate metrics at each site and grades the stream for health. And this is on an inverse scale, so this is the worst health down here, very poor, up to 10, excellent. And again, if we go across the Kinney from top to bottom, we've got a couple sites up here in the good category, actually 4, and this one is very close it's on the fair good borderline. So again, very good comparability across the entire Kinney, upper and lower, in the good category. And then we've got site 515 here in the poor category. So let me just say briefly a little bit about site 515. Here's a photo of it. This is the new channel that cut through 100 years of sediment deposition in Lake Louise after the lake was drawn down after the flood of 2020. So if we start to stack some of these multiple metrics, species richness, number of EPT species, HBI, MIBI, the macroinvertebrate community in this new stream section is pretty degraded. And that's the power of these metrics. So I think contributing factors here include channel instability. It's trying to find its own permanent, not permanent, but the right meander for it as it courses through Lake Louise. So there's a lot of lateral movement yet. These are 8 to 10 foot high, very unstable banks that are shedding sediment into the stream bottom. So a lot of fine sediment presence, not only at the site location, and this is actually the riffle we sampled. You can see the sampling sites here with the orange flags. But I think a lot of this fine sediment is shedding from upstream as well. And then we have to remember that Lake George is still there upstream, and it's a water quality nightmare. And all of the water coming out of Lake George is coursing through and over those aquatic macroinvertebrates at this site. So bottom line is what we learned for management purposes is I think the new Kinney will greatly benefit from river restoration after dam removal. Not that it wouldn't recover on its own after a long period of time, but I think we can basically speed up that process and return the river to a more natural state, similar to top and bottom, in a faster time period. We're also collecting samples that serve as a baseline to see if this happens after restoration. We've got a pre-dam removal and restoration look at Lake Louise now. We can come back after dam removal and river restoration is complete, compare that macroinvertebrate community and see if we made a difference. One for time, right? That's good. Good.
Okay.
Okay.
This slide is put in place to compare our two protocols, maybe to satisfy our needs more than yours. But it's interesting to see with straight species richness how close the multi-habitat and the single habitat are together at 4 different sites. And again, a little bit more power generated out of the synergy of these two. This is for EPT only, for mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies. The same two colorations there for MH and SH. And then if we put them together, then we get this nice bump in the EPT species richness. These are the two.
Yeah, I think
We're going to skip a couple
So
here
it's
just in the interest of time because we want to hear a lot of good questions. And then the stakes.
So kind of wrapping things up here, this is an impressive number because overall the number of macroinvertebrate unique species that have been documented in the Kinney, 2002 samples, 2022 samples at just 4 sites so far. Combining multi-habitat and single habitat, we have 80 plus different unique species present in the Kinney from top to bottom, which is amazing. Furthermore, if we look at species abundance across those 80 species, it's the individual contributions are relatively evenly distributed. There are not many numerically dominant species, which is what you might expect to see in a system that's been really impacted by either pollution or stressors. If you've got a high tolerance value, you're oftentimes the only one there. And so what you hope to see in a complex, healthy system is a nice distribution of these individuals representing all of the species present. In 2002, there were 8 orders represented and 7 in 2022. And the ones in common were mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies, beetles, diptera, amphipods. And less consistently present were odonata and isopoda. And if we drop down a taxonomic level, number of families, 16 in 2002, 14 in 2022. Those were based on multi-habitat data. And so those numbers were not statistically significantly different.
Just a few more final statements here. We're seeing pretty high, consistently high species richness values across the sites at this time. And although a single number, it means a lot. Caddisfly species richness is 26 at this point, just based on the sites that we've done. And this is approaching the 30 species that Houghton and DeWalt report for the least disturbed streams in their north central U.S. Long-term study. So we like that number. We'd like to see more. Recollection has been good from 2002 to 2022 of the EPT groups. HBI values at 6 sites are in the excellent, good, and very good range with 1 fair. And our macroinvertebrate index of biotic integrity values at the 6 sites are good, fair, and poor.
So I mentioned previously, we're halfway through our survey work. All of these red arrows indicate sites that are complete. We've sampled them in 2002 and 2003. We have the 2023 sampling results available, and we're starting to incorporate them into the slides that you've already seen for multiple metrics. So I think the strength of adding 2023 will be a very positive thing. This year, we'll be covering sites 3 and 5 in the lower Kinney, and then 9 and 11 in the upper Kinney, and then largely finishing things off next year in the upper Kinney, 13, 15, 16, 17, and then the one station down near the mouth of the St. Croix River. That is it. Acknowledgements, man, Kiap-TU-Wish has been a hero here supporting this project. It's been a 4-year project, significant cost, but I think it represents a big investment in us better understanding the current health of the Kinney, comparison to what it was previously, and setting the stage for this to recur at some point in the future. I should point out Kinney Corridor Collaborative paid for half of the lab analyses of the 2022 samples. So we really appreciate their contribution. The rest of this is all volunteer time. The Kinney CC stream team has been involved. Reed Daywald, who you see here, Amber Rappel, Tova Flygare, UW River Falls, and Reed and Amber were UW River Falls students. And then Sean Morrison with Interfluve, Doctors Wheeler and Rader at UW River Falls, and our monitoring hero here at Kiap-TU-Wish, John Kaplan. So thanks to all of those folks. They've all gotten their feet wet as we've been collecting these first 2 rounds of samples. And then Jeff Dimmick and his staff at UW Stevens Point and their aquatic biomonitoring lab, just phenomenal work. If you have any questions after tonight, hopefully we've got time to field a few questions right now. You can contact either me or Clarke by email or otherwise. And we'll continue to build on this report as we go along and get additional data. So the robustness of the results will only improve with time and more data here. Yep, some time for questions.
Hand out those,
Oh.
or we can put them up, but.
Yeah, we can either hand out the surveys. It would be great if we get your feedback on your impressions of what's going on with Kinney hatches. Be absolutely amazing, and we can use it in our report analysis as well. So make sure you grab one of those before you go. And at this point, I think we can field some questions. Scott.
Yeah, this is unrelated to your studies. It's related to stream health. What happened to all the frogs?
Yeah, I just qualitatively, without going into a lot of the research that's been conducted on those frogs and the theories that have been floating around out there. I think reptiles and amphibians have been similarly impacted in the same vein that aquatic insects have, with habitat loss and particularly agricultural and urban impacts, pesticides, herbicides. In a general way, I think that's how best to respond to your question, is they're seeing similar slides to bugs. Thanks. Yeah, Tom.
Is it an unrealistic expectation that the new stream corridor between the dams would have numbers similar to the other sections that you sample?
I would absolutely expect that, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Because basically now you've got connectivity between the upper Kinney in terms of habitat presence throughout that whole reach from above the dams to.
So you expect it to go?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Numbers of EPT species and overall species that you saw at Site 515 should greatly improve if we provide habitat and get rid of water quality issues upstream, immediately upstream. Yeah, Gary.
How much do you think that stretch is impacted by the wastewater, if at all?
I would guess if the River Falls wastewater treatment plant has gone the way of all wastewater treatment plants in the country, they're permitted by the state regulatory agency. They have to meet very tight discharge limits so that water quality standards can be met. I would say that's probably a minor contribution, although it is there. So I think there's a possibility, but if I had to rank and rate stressors, I would say that would be lower on my list. John?
So I think I'm somewhat, my very limited understanding of this, somewhat buoyed by the qualitative analysis here. Is it Pollyannish to assume that that can somehow also relate to quantitative measures? You understand what I'm asking? Right?
Yeah. The difference in the two protocols is the multi-habitat is more inventorying of different types present. And because of the protocol, we can't lean heavily on absolute numbers of organisms collected, but we can with the single habitat. That's more quantitative because we're basically sampling a total of 1 square meter of riffle area at each one of those sites. So that's one thing we have not done here, or at least presented here, but we can start comparing numbers, I think, a little bit from site to site. And if not absolute numbers, then proportions, percentages of different insect groups present at this site compared to this site. So that is definitely on our radar and something that I have already been playing around with. Yeah.
When you've done your monitoring at the comparative sites between 2020,
2002,
2002 current.
Yep.
And have you noticed any changes in substrate content, diversity of substrate content between the two sampling sites?
Do you want to take a shot?
We didn't collect habitat data in the original survey of '01 and '02, so we don't have that information. There is an extensive collection of that kind of data by Wisconsin DNR station evaluation. So there might be a way to tweak some of that out, but it'd be a bit of work.
And just to quickly follow up on that, with the addition of the single habitat protocol, that's one of the things that we do, is to better understand why certain organisms are present in those riffle areas. We're looking at what, there's three maybe primary contributors to why insects are present in a riffle. One is water depth, one is current velocity, water velocity, and maybe the most important is what's on the bottom. So we're making measurements of all of those, the various types of riffle habitat, from boulders, bedrock, rubble, gravel, sand, silt. We're estimating, we have an instrument called a gravelometer that not sophisticated name, but it does a nice job of estimating those different contributions of habitat presence. So yeah, from here forward, we should have a better idea of determining if habitat's changed, if something has changed in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, Scott, go ahead.
Do you anticipate any speed or cross-pollination?
Oh, I think absolutely. So you'll have connectivity now from upper to lower, whereas I think it would be very difficult given those two reservoirs, the warming influence of both reservoirs, the stagnant water. That'll all change with dam removal and river restoration, and basically you'll have nice continuity from upstream to downstream. So with regard to invertebrate drift, I think it will make a difference of the upper Kinney possibly inoculating, if you will, or helping to populate the lower Kinney. Yeah.
Site called Powell Falls. That's looking as good because there's so much disruption. Yeah. I mean, feeling like it is.
That's an excellent question, and I think eyeballing it, I think you can see this in the numbers in the lower Kinney. We had 3 sites, that 504, which is immediately downstream from the dam, and then 478, which is in Lower Glen Park, and then 120, which is down by County F. So after that drawdown, that whole section of the Kinney between Powell Falls and Glen Park was just saturated with sediment. That was 2020 when the drawdown occurred in October. So I think what's been happening in the interim 2 years is a lot of that sediment closest to the dam is being mobilized and moved downstream. And so that rubble area, riffle rubble area that was infested, invaded by sediment from the drawdown is cleared out. And it's actually high quality habitat right now. And it's maybe a little less impact at 478, and the sediment keeps moving downriver, so you can see a little bit of a rebound at 478, and still 120 is a little degraded at County Road F. So I think slowly that section is clearing itself of sediment, which is kind of amazing given the last 3 years have been drought and hardly any flood events. So it's mobilizing on its own and moving on down the river. Yeah.
Okay. Clarke, I understood the comparative analysis between 2023, but looking at individual, do you have any sense on population numbers? Yeah, that's why. So for instance, in 2002, you know, shales. Numbers then compared to.
I think that's something that we're going to be able to discover when we really have time to dig into the data. We're just seeing the tip of the iceberg right now with these species richness numbers, but it's soon, hopefully, and with more data coming in, we'll be able to go through those and analyze them by, like the mayflies, we can analyze by family and right on down to species. And if we do that with the single habitat, then we're dealing with you know, comparable samples numerically.
Question, there's a sulfur for Dr. Garry. There's a sulfur hatch on the lower Kinney, and it's the main one that comes off. The first hatch that comes off there is supposedly a Femarella species, and I'm wondering, has that ever been identified down to the species level? And what is that level? What is that called?
There are two, yeah, it's the species. Ephemerella is the genus. It's family Ephemerellidae, and there are two species. The larger one is excrucians, and the smaller ones is Nidamai.
Okay.
And Mike might be able to help out a little bit. I don't remember which one it comes hatches first, but
Well, they're excursions is an afternoon kind of thing. The Niedermeyer seems to be evening.
okay. So yeah, two species, one larger, one smaller, both in larvae and as pre-adults and adults.
Yeah, one question online here. So Dan says, thank you, first of all, and then he's got a two-part question. So he says, would environmental DNA monitoring be a useful or complementary way to characterize changes in invertebrate composition for diversity? First question. Second question is, are there any connections between land use and management practices and changes in our macroinvertebrates?
I don't know how much work has been done with aquatic macroinvertebrates and eDNA analysis. I think some of that is ongoing yet, and I think it could be a very useful tool by going down that hole and having that tool available for evaluation. I don't know a lot about it. Secondly, that land use water connection is huge. And I think as many of you are aware, the Kinney is a predominantly agricultural watershed. So while things look pretty good in the Kinney, I wouldn't discount several threats to the watershed, with agriculture being an ongoing threat. I think if we were to look for neonics in the Kinney based on DNR's sampling 100 sites across the state last year, we'd probably find them. So I think there are probably things that we haven't looked for in the Kinney that are likely there with agricultural contributions. And then of course this chapter has been working diligently for many years on stormwater management to offset impacts of impervious cover in the River Falls area. So I think we've made great progress there. There's still some work to be done, but I would say those are the two primary drivers within the Kinney watershed. Yes.
Just curious if the 2002 report is public. And is there data in there that looks at individuals and
I didn't get that question. The 2002 report, is that available?
No. 2001, I can provide you with a copy of if you'd like that. 2002 was set aside and is just now getting its analysis done.
So you're breaking down 2002 and 2022 simultaneously?
Yes,
Okay.
side by side.
But Clarke does have a project report from 2001, because I think the chapter actually helped fund some of that work
Oh, definitely,
Yeah, so there is a 2001 report available on the Kiap website in the Cold Water Science Library, which describes that. It's an awesome report, so check that out.
Have you tried to correlate, Casey does survey work that does biomass, and you're doing survey work that kind of correlates to biomass. Have we tried to compare those?
What you'd actually have to do on the biomass end is add the biomass analysis to the taxonomic process. And it can be
So you don't
done.
have a quantitative.
We do have an estimate for the single habitat samples of number of individuals present in each species. What we don't have, I guess we could possibly get it from the literature, but there are multiple instars present too. The best way to do that is have the lab do a biomass analysis for the collective individuals in each species represented, and we aren't doing that.
But certainly as we look at Casey's survey work and the numbers that are good, and that's biomass and also reflective of a healthy stream as well.
Right,
And
yeah.
You go back down and.
Yeah, it's easy to weigh and measure trout.
No, but I'm just.
You absolutely raise a valid point. You can see that in the biomass estimates, which we could easily make with a hex hatch. So that's a very valid point in terms of what's contributing the most biomass across the spectrum of species present in the Kinney. And I think that's what you're getting at, but we don't have good information on that. Thanks. Yeah, Mike.
How would you measure this?
I think most of these state labs now, like the Wisconsin State Lab of Hygiene, and Garry can speak to Department of Ag Lab over in the Twin Cities, have the analytical capability to analyze a number of different compounds present in that class of insecticides. So basically you collect a sample and submit it to the lab, and they return analyses based on the number of different analytes that you want to see.
And is that a sample of water or sample of deposition?
Water sample. Yeah. Yeah, Garry, take the mic.
So it's Garry Horvath. I retired as lab director at the Department of Ag, and I started my career as a pesticide residue chemist. So I know this issue. So the issue is a water sample. If you go out and grab a water sample and measure it, what's in there, you can determine if there's a residue. But many of these agricultural chemicals are flow driven. And if you to really get a feel for what's happening and the kind of loading and more acute effects are, you have to have a flow weighted composite sample. So what we had in Minnesota was samplers that would sense a rise in the stage of the river, and they would start sampling, and they would composite, take more sample the higher the flow, and then that would get composited into one sample representing basically the loading during that event. And those numbers can be quite significant. Neonicotinoids are pretty prevalent, and I still know the people over there, and I still get reports. And so some of those levels can be quite high under flow conditions, but not everyone does that. I'm not sure if Wisconsin incorporates that or not, but they kind of will go out during a flow event and grab a sample. But some of those numbers can really peak, and so you can have these acute effects.
Thanks, Garry. That is the trend for water chemistry analysis, is going towards loads of pollutants, and that's a common way to, the composite sample is a good way to do that. Similar to biomass for biology spectrum. So I think we had a question.
Yeah, you
over here.
earlier suggested something about advocacy for the Kiap-TU-Wish chapter. I was wondering if you had some ideas or suggestions for that kind of advocacy.
Yeah, we were.
About neonics.
Yeah, we were just talking about that by email here. in the last day or so, knowing that, Mike Miller's presentation tomorrow night, and talking trout at Wisconsin TU, 8 o'clock. Tune in. We're getting consistent stories here and likely consistent impacts occurring. So that would be an example of how Wisconsin Trout Unlimited, with support from all the chapters, could weigh in at the state level, the legislative level, and advocate for no use of these chemicals, as Europe has done in many cases. And then if you start to collaborate with other organizations like River Alliance of Wisconsin, the voices get louder and you've got partners and collaborators. And I think really that's the only thing that has moved the ball in the environmental advocacy court, is the public weighing in on these issues. And boy, in my experience, it takes legislation to make things happen. It's really hard to say, gee whiz, will you please change your habits? Boy, and a good example of that, being in the wastewater treatment business over in the Twin Cities for 40 years, it came through the Clean Water Act and a mandate. Public wasn't going to put up with this polluting of our waters by industries and municipalities. So the Clean Water Act did just that. It mandated an end to all of this. But if you remember things like Rachel Carson and Silent Spring and books and public uproar, a lot of that was what drove the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, a lot of the environmental legislation of that era. So yeah, absolutely. Should Trout Unlimited be doing more than stream restoration? Yeah.
I've only been here maybe 3 or 4 years, and I hear rumors of the hex hatch. Is it coming back?
A good question, because I think hex hatches on the Kinney are very rare. I'd heard anecdotal stories from chapter members that there used to be one up near Swinging Gate on the northeast corner of River Falls, and there might have been some there stories at other locations. But I think, Clarke, you only collected 1 or 2 individuals in 2001, 2002, down near the mouth with the St. Croix River, and there are commonly hex hatches occurring in the St. Croix River, Lake St. Croix in the summer months. So they're, I would say, rare. And having said that, there's a vial full of Hexagenia bilineata that Dr. John Wheeler collected in July 5th, 2022 from the Holiday Station right across the street. So where did they come from? The proximate Lake George is my assumption. Or, you know, these disperse over fairly long distances depending on weather conditions as well. So it's possible that these could have even been a hatch from the St. Croix River. So, yeah, Dean.
I know several places where I collect Hexagenia on the willow, not on the kidwood, but on the willow. They're common and still very. They're gonna walk in the city, you know, it looks like someone took a pencil and poked it into the mud. It's the little entrances and exits to the burrow. So they're hex are in the willow. I don't collect anything.
Yeah, the habitat in the Kinney is really very marginal. They really require a silt, very organic silt substrate that they can build their U-shaped burrows, and then they circulate water through those burrows with their gills and collect microorganisms and organic matter. And so there's very little of that present in the Kinney.
Well, thanks so much, Dr. Garry and Kent, for an excellent talk, and I look forward to your further results coming out, and it's gonna be exciting, so thanks so much. Appreciate it. One more time. All right, so for the auction, we'll probably give that till, say, around 9:05. So if you want to get in last minute bid, go ahead. And we got like a ton of giveaways here. I got flies from Bob Trevis and hats and, whole fly boxes full of bass flies. So, John, give me a number 1 through 50. 33. Joe Cap. Yeah, it's like you didn't know, John.
Didn't know.
So there's. Yeah, you can choose. John, give me another one. 41?
21.
Okay. Rainbow Bear.